All right, so who's going first? Carlito, you and Eddie? Eddie, you got to come up here, man. You guys, your name are the experts, right? Hopefully it's still going. Come on over here. Story time. Story time.
Story time.
Correct me. You want to start or you want me to start, Eddie?
You can start.
All right, Carlos. Give us all the secrets. Okay. Secrets. We have fished a couple times out of Chokoloskee, and we've done pretty well catching redfish and snook. A lot more redfish than snook, which we usually don't find that many reds. What secrets can I tell? Well,
all of them. Not on YouTube. We're not going to remember them anyway.
I'll say this. We have fished a lot in that area, so we have fished a lot of different areas, and we're slowly kind of, I think, learning where to be and how to fish it.
Fighting them.
And to make it, I guess, simple, I think it's, and it's not a secret. It's being at the right place at the right time, but depending on the tide. I think the tide height, whether the water is very high or very low, is the real key into finding fish, at least where we're fishing.
Oh, yeah.
If the water's too high, the fish are inaccessible. If the water's too low, the fish are inaccessible. So you got to be at the right place at the right time, and you got to move because that window's short. You got an hour or two in that window. So you got to be kind of mobile.
What are you looking for?
In regards to that?
Yeah, how do you know when the tide was right, other than there being fish?
Time on the water. Well, no, I'm.
You put a pole in the water.
I would say the middle of the tide, and I think the lower half of either incoming or outgoing is a little better. So it's kind of when there's enough water where fish want to get either into the mangrove or getting out of the mangroves. Because once they're in there, at least if you're fishing like we like to fish with plastics, and it's hard to lure them out. If you're going to sit and chunk that bait that smells, and then you may have a chance to lure fish out. But if you're using artificials, it's a little bit more difficult to lure them out. So unless you've got a perfect little skip cast that goes really underneath those mangroves, you need the fish to come up, to be out more closer to you in more accessible water. So that tide, kind of the lower half of the tide, I think has been the more productive time of water or time on the water. You have anything you want to add there, sir?
No, basically what Carlos has been saying, the tides have been really the key to this great fishing that we've been doing lately. The bait that we're using, basically the jigs, the soft plastics. We've been using white. Soft plastics. Also, my go-to is always the black jig. You could tip it with the shrimp, or you could just jig it there. If the bite is on, you don't need to tip it with the shrimp. So what I've noticed is that the tides is a trick. Has been what's been helping us.
You're saying the middle tide.
The middle tide.
Yes.
Not high tide or low tide.
Nah. The other thing that at least I concentrated on when we've been catching fish is finding a creek mouth on the outgoing. Usually on the outgoing, I kind of tend to stick to the big passes. So Rabbit Key Pass, Sandfly Pass, and I think there's fish there, but they're a little bit more spread out. If you find a little creek mouth, you can get fish that are concentrated there. In the summertime, I usually fish the outside. We're usually looking for some cooler water, so the outside is usually more productive. I usually don't fish in the back country as much. So in the outside, along the shoreline, creek mouth, outgoing tide, last of the outgoing tide.
Can't go wrong.
That's when the little creeks are the most.
So when it's high tide, what do you do to spend your time?
Looking for birds.
Okay, well, that was one thing I was thinking of talking about is usually we have a kind of set plan to fish those areas, but I would throw an audible quickly if I see birds on a shoreline. You know, fishing shorelines with birds on it usually will help produce. High tide, so birds, and high tide I usually look for same idea, the kind of water that's inaccessible when the tide is lower, but not on a mangrove shoreline because then they can get into the mangrove. So maybe something like an oyster bar off the mangroves, some shallow sand off the beaches where they can't hide. They may be very shallow on the beach, but they're not hiding in some deep mangroves underneath cover. So that's usually what I try to do.
You mentioned reds and snook. You catch any trout?
A couple, but not as many.
How
think we
about
had
the wind?
one or two.
How about the wind?
The wind,
You want the wind behind you, in front of you, coming across the side?
I think different scenarios. We fished it coming from the south. I think that helps. I mean, keep the water in. Gives you a little bit more water when you're on the shoreline we were fishing. So maybe the water's not coming out as much, but I don't think it makes a huge difference, at least on the shoreline there. It may just affect the tide a little more. I'm sorry? Electric motor. Electric motor. Very slow. I would really, the electric motor to kind of get in position since we had the wind from the south, turned it off. Kind of drifted into position. When you hit the anchor lock, your boat always kind of makes a ruckus, right? So I saw the pool or the little depression that we wanted to fish. So I slowly kind of maneuvered the boat where we were floating in backwards, right? So that when I hit the lock button, the boat was already in the position, so the boat didn't have to shift and turn around and make a ton of noise. So I kind of positioned the boat before we got close, kind of backwards, drifted in backwards, and then when I hit the spot lock, it was kind of minimal noise.
Then I started catching fish.
What kind of depths?
The fish were probably in 3 feet of water,
Really.
but it was surrounded by very shallow water. We couldn't get out at the end of the tide. We had to wait about an hour to get water to get out.
Yeah, we had to wait a while. I lost my flip flops, by the way. Trying to get out.
Yeah, if you go to our spot, look for Eddie's flip flops.
We tried to walk the boat out, but it was just too shallow.
Too shallow.
We just went back into deeper water and waited it out for a couple hours. Good thing is, we had a lot of things to drink. A lot of refreshments.
Yeah, fresh water, right?
Yeah.
A lot of water. You looking for current? No current? You want clear running water or muddy water? What works?
We had more success when the water was clear because we went back and caught a couple more fish in the same area, but not as many.
Well, in that place where we were fishing, there was a mixture of clear water and like reddish,
With the tide.
like a red type.
Well, it was after the storm as well, so that
Yeah.
tannic water was probably all the fresh water coming out. So that changed the water a little bit. Also, talking about the importance of the tide, we got there a little early, so there was a lot of water. We caught a couple fish,
Right.
but it wasn't as good as the time when the tide was perfect. And we decided to leave and go back at the end of the tide. So we left to the next cove over, caught some fish there in a similar situation, creek mouth, outgoing tide, we caught some fish there. And then when we went back, we were just barely making it in and we didn't want to get stuck again. So we went in, made 2 or 3 casts, caught fish in 2 or 3 casts, and then bolted out of there.
Bolted out.
So how do you go find the beach?
Google Maps.
And you'll see the deep.
I know what he said.
And like we like to run south. You gotta go far.
How deep was this pothole?
It's about 3 feet, I would say.
That's all.
Yeah. But you gotta. I think the best. You gotta make a little run. You gotta have a little adventure in you.
Were you like, were you south of Mormon or north of Mormon?
South or north of?
Mormon.
Mormon Key.
We were by the mouth of Chatham River.
Chatham.
The Chatham River.
So basically, it would be north. It would be north of
Mormon.
I gotta
Just
cut-
north.
I gotta cut that out of the video.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it wasn't at the mouth; we were by the mouth. But that narrows everything
Down to the
down.
river, right? Down by the creek.
Yeah, we like to run south, so we fish south a lot. The tides, they're cyclical. So every 2 weeks, you kind of got the same tide
So
more or
now
less.
you're syncing with the moon.
So,
So you're on the wax
We went
here
2
or
weekends.
waning gibbous.
oh no, no, you got me there.
Is it bigger or smaller? Full moon? I
Wouldn't-
don't know.
I don't know.
Just once every 2 weeks, right? You
Well,
look
say
at
the tide is more or less the same every 2 weeks. So if you could time it where, okay, I know in this area we caught fish on the outgoing, but then in 2 weeks when you go back, you can go back to the same spot, and that's kind of what we did.
Okay, well, in the middle moon, you get a double tide, and in the full or the new moon, you get one big strong tide.
Right?
They come together to make one big strong. So one of those two is where you're at, right?
Big tide.
Big tide. Okay.
Big time.
All right.
But
Awesome.
put it this way, it was so big that little pavilion key was like, it looked like a
Yeah,
giant oasis out there of sand,
that's low tide.
low tide, full of birds.
Yeah.
We fished around it, but we didn't get it.
I'm going to cut that one out of the video too.
We fished around it, yeah. We caught about, I'm just kidding. No, the fishing was good. Fishing is good out there.
Jerry said he used to catch all kinds of fish out there.
Yeah.
But that was a different
Well,
time of day.
you asked me about trout. Trout really, I've noticed that the trout bite is better down in Flamingo than
Yeah.
it is up there up in Chokoloskee. You have a better chance of catching trout and snook. If you're with me, you'll catch a redfish in Flamingo. But,
For sure.
We'll
watch you.
watch me catch it, right? But yeah, the trout I've noticed that they're farther south.
Okay.
They're farther south.
It is what it is.
He's the man. I can't
Trout
see
are a
him.
little farther out in the Gulf, as you go.
To be honest with you, Flamingo is just right out of going towards Snakebite.
Yeah, I'm talking about up at the Chokoloskee area.
Right.
If you're out a little bit further in the edge of the Gulf, maybe more trout.
I think deeper water. We're usually trying to fish as shallow as possible, basically. So we're not running into them as much. But I think deeper water.
Nice 18-inch trout recently right off of Pavilion in water about that deep. I thought I was casting into a redfish. It was a trout.
Okay. Let's see what I'm.
And I camp out at Rabbit Key in March usually with my wife, and I'm always able to get trout just skirting along the islands with a 4-inch paddle tail. And then sometimes over by Jack Daniels Key, there's a grass flat off there, and I troll across there with the sailing kayak, and big paddle tails. Trout will always pop up and hit them. They like the 5-inch paddle tails better than the little ones.
I'm gonna put Ernie on the spot too, because he had a photo as well, right? All right, Ernie, talk to us, buddy.
Well,
You go, Arnie.
I don't know how much advice you guys want from me. So, George and I ended up going Saturday. The initial plan was fish around Sanibel, and got to the ramp under construction after a 2-hour drive of getting there. So that was a bummer. Then the plan was, go into the ramp at Sanibel, but then you got to pay $400 for a parking permit. So I go, we're not doing that.
$400?
$400. At least that's what I saw online. So I go, we're not doing that. So we ended up at Lover's Key. It's kind of weird saying everything, hanging out with George at Lover's Key. But anyway, we went to the state park.
Was it a romantic day?
It was a very romantic day. I'll say that what Carlos and Eddie are talking about, I wholeheartedly agree with, because I purposely went because I was targeting the outgoing tide and trying to fish some of the passes and and then some of the creek mouths coming out of Estero Bay and stuff like that. And we got there right around the middle of the tide, or the middle of the outgoing. We started at one of the passes, on one of the sides of the passes. We got there pretty early, so I was throwing top water, throwing a white mirror lure. And I don't know, maybe like 5-6 casts in, nice snook. He had a couple more hits. I had a couple hits that threw the spook up in the air, but they wouldn't hook. But definitely no moving water. The water was cleaner, so that was pretty cool. We ended up going into one of the canals right off the pass, and the jacks were just destroying the bait in there. They were under the docks. Yeah, under the docks. They were hitting the ladders. The ladders were rattling. I mean, it was unbelievable. I've never seen anything. They were hitting them so hard. And that one is where I ended up
Were they churning the surface or just?
They were. They were. They're, I go, oh, let me throw a top water. Let me see what's going to happen. Knowing full well what's going to happen. And sure enough, ended up catching 2 on the same cast, on the same lure. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, it was pretty cool. But we ended up in there, fished there for a little while. Then ended up moving a little further back. So the plan was I didn't want to go further back because, again, knowing that the water was hot, we still had an outgoing tide. And thankfully, it's not a long run to get back there. And when we're running through, we fished some other areas, but when we ran towards I was running a little deeper back. I noticed one area, the water just got clean. And one, I'm going to call it like a little bay almost, not even really a little bay. There was just a couple scattered islands. But the water got really clean. So I had an outgoing tide, but the wind was coming from the west. So the wind was coming from behind me. But that water got clean, and I saw a mangrove line that the wind was blowing into. So I figured, okay, if it's going to blow any bait, it's going to blow it up against that shoreline. Sure enough, one point, caught a snook on one of the points. Then we got a few other bites. He hooked a nice slot snook that took him into the trees. We just couldn't stop. But definitely it was a lot more productive. Moving water past the mangrove, cleaner water, the wind blowing into it. So, I think everything just kind of set up right. And that's where we saw the most bites, was on that shoreline. So yeah, can't wait to get back there. Can't wait to get back there.
Awesome.
It was a great day.
Sanibel?
That was at Estero Bay. So off of Fort Myers Beach, south of Sanibel. Yep.
He's about 15 miles south.
South.
of that.
South.
Closer to the fish.
So yeah, for me, I mean, I go there because it's actually a shorter drive for me to go there than it is to go to Flamingo.
That's amazing. Well, I'll meet you there.
So it's an hour and a half for me to get there. It's 2 hours for me to get to Flamingo.
I'll meet you there.
So I'll go there.
Awesome. Phil?
Sure. Well, I was out today. The water was just. I was out today looking for bonefish, and the water was just too hot. Saw one, got in perfect casting position for it, moved my fly, and it just spooked 65 feet away. And that was the last thing I saw. The water was getting up about 92. I said, man, it's too hot on this side of the bay. Let me go to the outside. So I ran over through sands. It was 94. So I'm going to wait until after a thunderstorm cools things down.
That's a good point.
So I'll be out probably Friday evening looking after the storms coming up. But my big excitement of the month was fly fishing in Montana. And I've wanted to go fly fishing for trout since I was 14 years old. I retired last week. So I went out fly fishing in Montana, stayed at a friend's cabin, hired a guide, which I arranged in April. And I told him I don't want to catch fish, I want to learn to catch fish. And so he gave me an 8-hour-long fly fishing lesson. And it was fabulous. I was back out. Next day, caught a 21-inch cutthroat on a size 16 dry fly. And just,
What weight line were you using?
the 5-weight.
Okay.
It was just marvelous. So I learned how to fish streamers for brown trout and dry droppers for rainbows and dry flies for cutthroats. Just had a blast.
Awesome. That's great. And I saw wolves at Yellowstone. Really? Yeah. Another lifelong wish. They can keep the distance from me. I was a mile away.
Awesome. Okay. Any other reports? No? Well, I go ahead.
No, I went out on the 29th.
Give him the phone. So,
Thought I got to keep it.
So went out on the 29th with a guide because I wanted to take my grandson and my son that almost never goes out fishing. We went out of Chokoloskee and we went far as I think that Alligator Point was about the furthest that we went out. And we only managed to get a couple of reds, and one of my sons got one snook, but it just broke off right at the boat. Okay, couldn't keep it anyways. So.
You're flamingo?
No. South of Pavilion towards Alligator Point, and but they were doing exactly what Carlos was saying. He was going up to where he knew the creeks were discharging, and trying to get shrimp on a cork or lures. I was trying some soft plastics, and my son and my grandson were doing cork and shrimp, and a bunch of little reds. I mean, little, like 11 inches. I got skunked like hell. I got the smallest snook I've ever caught, barely 6 inches. And what Carlos was saying is true. You know, we were working the lower side of the outgoing tide, and he was approaching, and then as it was getting drier, he was pulling back out. And that's about it.
awesome. You catch me just for a minute. All right, I'll give you a report from Matt Lachey, Aquatic Preserve. That's where I was a week or so ago. And I've got the John boat. There's a couple islands north of the bridge there. Shallow water, I go up and fish those. I ended up with a 12-inch redfish and, some trout and stuff like that. And I'm up on that flat, and the porpoise dolphins, they come up and they start. I had one swim up to the boat. I had a ladyfish. I threw it to him and he spit it out. He didn't want it because it wasn't good enough for him.
Did he say what he wanted?
Yeah, he wanted the trout or the redfish, right?
Did he go like this?
Yeah. No, he put it in his mouth and then spit it out. He literally didn't want it. It's amazing. It's just like a dog, And then I went a little further, and it's deeper water, which was the opposite. I'm tendency to go to the shallow water, looking for them in the sand and up next to the mangroves. Now I was out in 6 to 8 foot of water, and I hooked a cobia, I hooked a Spanish mackerel, and a big gator trout. Boom, boom, boom! It was right off the high tide, and then I kept getting surrounded by porpoise. Now look, you know what? Those aren't porpoise. Those are pods of tarpon. So I had pods, or 5 or 6 tarpon, around me all the time. They come up and they would go on the surface and they go back down and they come up again, 50 feet, 100 feet away, and like that. So
you wanted your ladyfish.
I didn't have a ladyfish then. If I had put it on the bottom, they would have probably taken it. But so ultimately, Boca Grande is over there. And that's where they're all going back out in the Gulf. But evidently they come in, and I guess they go south and go down towards Sanibel Bridge and all those areas in there and gorge, and then turn around and go back out, because it's after the high tide is when they started moving out. But what was the logic was the deeper water had more fish than up on the flats,
Cooler.
Yeah, I guess it was cooler. And also it started just beginning of the falling tide, so between the two of those, I was out every day. I went 3 times in the week, and each day I was out just on the peak of the high tide. So it was perfect to be able to work on it a little bit and get a feel for it. So I'm still new to the territory, but anyway, that's Herman's report. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you again, and Belinda. We have to thank Belinda for the dinner, the wonderful dinner that we had. And we'll do it again next time. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. We need to do that more often, right?